Hey there everyone, Pal here, and welcome back. It's time for some more Star Citizen, and today we are talking scale. Before we get into that, footage you're watching in the background is 2.6.1 on the PTU. So I've only spent maybe about 2 hours with it. From what I can tell, 2.6.1 is close to ready for launch. I think you're going to see this out to everyone probably within the next 10 days. There's a few small bugs that I think they need to iron out or will iron out before they launch. For example, I was receiving quite a few hard crashes when trying to do ship loadouts. So you would swap out the weapon on a wing or something, and it would just hard crash to desktop. And that would happen 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5 times. It was pretty darn common. So something like that they really need to look into. There's some new ship bugs they've managed to introduce. One of my favorite ships, or my favorite ship, the Vanguard Warden. Its forefront laser cannons, the nose cannons, now fire down at like a 45-degree angle rather than forward, which is pretty funny considering they're hard mounted into the nose of that thing. They can't actually pivot, so I don't know how they pulled that one off. But there's some little things like that. In terms of content and what you can expect to see in this, if you haven't followed, it's mostly a patch fix. It's mostly fixing some little bugs here or there. There's not a whole lot of new features. There's also been some balancing changes. The one real new feature I did notice, like the only thing that stood out as that's brand new, was the grenade icon in Star Marine. They now have icons to show where the grenades are. Of course, they're not perfect. You can see them from almost any distance. I think like if someone throws one on the other end of the map, you see it. Like there's no fall off of, okay, it's more than 30 feet away. We don't need to render this. So you see people just throwing grenades on the other side of the map, and they you can't really tell how far they are from you, but those icons are in, which is great. Mostly, though, it's small things. The game's loading much faster, so their new, I forget what they're calling it, the new pipeline system is really allowing for fast load times. Pretty much from the main screen into Olisar is about 8 seconds for me, maybe a little bit less, running off an SSD, which is nice. You can go from Olisar to Arena Commander back, and all these loads are very, very fast. Launching a match in Arena Commander or whatever it's almost instantaneous. You're in and going, which is really good. Let's see, what else did they add in? There's the new server system, so you can now select US, EU, any, or Asia. I forget all the different servers and everything. I think we can thank Amazon for this one. My guess is they are using Amazon-based servers, and this was part of what they worked out with using the Lumberyard and advertising for Amazon and all of that, which is, it's pretty good. You know, I noticed the pings were a lot more even within the US Star Marine, whereas before I was regular seeing pings 180, 200. Pretty much everybody was 80 or below for the little bit of Star Marine I did find, though the player base was a lot less than it was before. Could just have been limited player base in the PTU since, limited launch on that part, but I did have trouble finding a match because of that. All in all, though, mostly just small little cosmetic things. Ooh, there was one really nice bug update. The missile tracking system where you would evade a missile and the icon would stay in the bottom of your screen forever. That has been fixed. That's so awesome. And this really goes back to the video I put out right after the new year where looking forward to 2017, put up or shut up. One of the things I said was I wanted to see a lot more small little patches like this, even if it requires me downloading a huge amount of the game and everything. It's just nice to see these small bugs fixed. And yeah, I'm happy with 2.6.1. It's good that it came so quick, or is coming as quick as it was. It gives me positive feelings going forward for 3.0. Probably, like I said, around May, June timeframe, I think seems fairly likely. Okay, let's get into today's conversation. Today, I want to talk about scale, the scale of Star Citizen, and why it's going to be a very important factor that they're going to have to balance carefully to both maintain strategic depth and value while also keeping the game somewhat approachable for the average consumer, or not even the average consumer, but keeping the game from becoming overly niche. It seems a little odd, but I am going to have to define scale, what I'm talking about here. We're not talking feature list. We're not talking the combination of the Newtonian flight system, the ships, the Star Marine, planetary landings. While you definitely could say that is part of the scale of Star Citizen, for today we're going to take that, we're going to call that the scope of Star Citizen. When I'm talking scale, I'm talking the literal travel time between two locations. Not so much the distance. The distance is somewhat arbitrary in this because quantum travel is a variable that can be adjusted up and down. What I mean by this, say you have two planets, planet A, planet B, those are 10 light years apart. Well, they could adjust quantum travel that takes 20 seconds. They could also adjust quantum travel that if those two planets were only 1 light year apart, it also takes 20 seconds. So the travel time is what is far more important than the actual legitimate distance between those two planets. The reason this is important is it goes both ways. As I already said, one of the things that could very much be a limiting factor in terms of the player base and the popularity of this game is travel time. If a brand new player logs in and after they get out of the tutorial area, they spend hours just going through warp, going through quantum travel to a warp gate, warp, quantum travel, everything, there's going to be a non-insignificant player base that just stops there. They're going to be bored out of their bloody minds and they're not going to continue on. You're going to have that friend that you managed to convince to buy the game and everything, and he logs in to find that your organization is 6 hours away. I don't know about you, but I would say 3/4 of my friends would never even consider playing the game for 6 hours of travel to get out there. It just wouldn't work. At the same time, though, if things are too small, too condensed, they lose that strategic value I was talking about before. If you have a planet, we'll say planet Y, out in deep space, and planet Y has a super rare resource on it, something that's really hard to come by and everything. Well, if that planet is, say, 45 minutes to an hour outside of the travel lanes and everything, the risk of going out there, getting that material and coming back increases, and the cost increases, and the influence on that resource becomes a lot more important. If pirates, say, jump a ship bringing that resource back in, well, you lose now 2 hours round trip time, whereas if it's only 10 minutes out there, you lose 20 minutes round trip, or if it's 5 minutes, you lose 10 minutes round trip. Also, taking items out to that planet, say you need to provide food and water to the miners or whatever, taking those resources out there, the longer that distance it is from the important trade lanes from the closest planet with those resources, the higher the value of those resources, also the more important those resources are, and the greater the risk of transporting those resources. So you need to have things isolated enough that they don't become just one homogeneous group of this solar system has these elements, right? If we get to the point where you don't look at individual planets for their resources, but you look at the overall solar system and what resources are in that solar system, well, then that solar system might as well just be one ball of gas that you go to. There's little differentiation between them because the travel time between the two is so short. Obviously, there is a legit differentiation. You have to go from one planet to the other, but if you can do it in 3 minutes, it's not all that substantial. It's mostly just a really long load screen that you're going through rather than an actual travel or risk you are taking. And this is really the balance they're going to have to find. This is why games like Euro Truck Simulator, the train simulators, those type of games, they definitely have a very strong fan base. But we have to ask ourselves, is that the type of fan base followers we're going to want within the game? Or do we want something a little bit larger, a little more approachable for people to play? I kind of have to go a little more to the left towards the more approachable, the more easily playable, but we have to walk a very fine line there. I remember my first time in Elite Dangerous and really getting into it. And it was me and 2 friends. We spawned in. We were going to fly around and try to get into some trouble, play it off, only to discover that all 3 of us spawned in different solar systems. We got out of the tutorial in different solar systems within the game that were nowhere near each other. And it took us about 90 minutes to all get to like one roughly central distant solar system. And along the way, you can maybe do 2 or 3 jumps, and then since you're in the early starter ship, you got to go get fuel, and you just spend a lot of time in their version of quantum travel. I forget what it's called, docking, getting fuel, launching up, and it was quite boring. It was quite boring to do. In fact, one of the guys, he died roughly 2/3 of the way and had to go all the way back to the last space station. He got fuel at and everything. He just stopped playing. He just stopped. It was enough for him. And is that bad? Well, not necessarily. It definitely means that those individual solar systems that we were jumping to, because they are spread out, each solar system had an important value within things. But they did lose 1/3 of their player base out of our group right there because of that travel time. There's also another layer that I think becomes important, and this will be more when they manage to get player-owned structures. And I know this is something they've talked about, they want to do. We'll see. We don't have a whole lot of information, but be them space stations or planetary-owned bases, it doesn't really matter. but those things are going to require a certain amount of resources. So the further out you are away from these central areas, the tougher it is going to be to keep those areas supplied with resources and everything, the greater the expense it is going to be to operate them. There's also going to be espionage and decoy tactics that you want to try and use against competing organizations. So if you can go out and you can convince an enemy fleet that you're doing something and draw their fleet away, say 45 minutes, an hour from their main base, well, this gives you a very good tactical advantage that you can bring in, say, a quick attack group to raid their home base. And there's nothing they can do. They have an hour travel time back in order to protect it. Well, that's completely different than if they're 5 minutes away and they can turn around and jump all the way back in 5 minutes. At the same time, though, fleets, organizations are going to be far less likely to take big risks traveling into competitive space and everything if it means traveling hours away from their base. They're going to much more stay close to that central location to their home base and protect things rather than risk losing everything while things are undefended. So the smaller the map, the shorter the distance, travel distance, probably the more guild v guild PvP competition we would see, but with less tactical advantage, less espionage, less decoy tactics that will actually go on. So as you can see, it's not a simple one or the other. It's a very complicated system, and they're going to have to find that correct balance. As I said towards the beginning, it's the good news is it shouldn't be too terribly hard for them to tweak as they go by adjusting quantum travel. For example, when we do get 3.0 and we have just basically the Crusader system, well, when that happens, they could go ahead and they could make quantum travel actually quite slow. And although we're all stuck within the same one solar system, it could, say, take 45 minutes to cross from one planet to the other. Well, as they add in additional solar systems, since the map, the galaxy map, the solar system map, whatever you want to call it, gets larger, they could then slowly increase that travel, that quantum speed. So now you can go ahead and you can cross, say, in 25 minutes, what you used to be able to do in 45 minutes, but because we now have 3 solar systems, there's more time, more travel overall in order to do. Things are starting to spread out. And that should be relatively easy for them to adjust. I imagine they've already taken into account quantum travel is probably a pretty easy variable they can move up or down. There will be the concern of quantum travel fuel or quantum fuel. That is going to be something they're going to have to tweak also in conjunction with this. If you run out of quantum fuel after 3 minutes, well, then you're going to need to constantly refueling at starfares and space stations and all of that, which is going to get old very fast. At the same time, if you can go 6 or 8 hours without needing to refuel, well, that's probably a lot more realistic to the way things actually would go. I mean, how many hours can you drive a car before you need to refuel? 5 on the low end, upwards of 10 or 12 on the high end. That's far more in line with what we would expect, but it also means that ships like the Starfarer have less usability. They're going to be less important for the overall play of the game. In fact, they'd probably only come into play when you start really pushing beyond inhabited space out into the deep reaches of space where there are no refuel stations, things along those lines. That makes sense for the Starfarer. That really does. It's probably the ideal role for the Starfarer. But it is something you have to keep in mind. Like, you did just devalue a ship because you adjusted the fuel rate to where your fuel lasts much, much longer. And it can also vary between each individual ship. I think / hope quantum travel is the same for every ship. Their fuel consumption or their fuel capacity can be completely different and should be different, but I don't think they should have this ship quantums at X, this ship quantums at Y. That is why we have the afterburners and the regular flight travel. Ideally, I think for me, quantum travel should be an equal among everybody for that point. Same with warp, when they do get the warp gates in going from solar system to solar system. That's likely to be mostly a load screen though, but we'll talk about that in a different time. I think that basically covers it. I don't have a good start here. This is what they should do. I just think it's very important when this does start coming out. You're going to have people that are going to want to go both ways to the extreme. And we're going to have to be smart about it. Provide good, honest feedback. We have to find that correct balance as a community where things are spread out enough that they're important strategically, they have their own economies and all that, but not so spread out that our game becomes overly niche. I want to see Star Citizen have a strong, healthy player base beyond those that just backed it. I want to be able to recommend this game to majority of my friends, not all, but majority of my friends, and hopefully have them enjoy it and have a good time and not be turned off by 3 hours of quantum travel. I think that would be a bad thing. At the same time, 3 minutes wouldn't be quite enough. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Until next time, though, this has been Power. Thanks for watching.